I never thought I'd be the kind of father who'd break the law. But when you find your daughter the way I found mine, the law starts to feel like a suggestion rather than a rule. My name's Marcus Chen, and I work on offshore oil rigs in the North Atlantic. It's brutal work, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, but the money's good, and it meant I could still see my daughter Sophie regularly after the divorce. She's 9 years old, loves ballet, and has this little hamster named Luna that she carries around like it's her best friend. My ex-wife Jennifer remarried about 8 months ago. Guy named Derek Palmer, personal trainer, fitness influencer, one of those people whose Instagram makes their life look perfect. I had my doubts about him from the start. Something about the way he smiled at Sophie, but never quite looked her in the eyes. But Jennifer seemed happy, and Sophie said he was okay, so I kept my mouth shut. First mistake. It was supposed to be Jennifer's weekend with Sophie, Memorial Day long weekend, Friday through Monday. I was scheduled to be on the rig until the following Wednesday, but a tropical storm rolled in faster than predicted. Coast Guard ordered an evacuation Monday morning at 4 a.m. By 6 a.m., I was on a helicopter heading back to shore, and by 7 a.m., I was driving through Austin in my pickup truck, exhausted but relieved to have solid ground under my feet. I figured I'd surprise Sophie, maybe take her for pancakes before Jennifer's custody time officially ended at noon. I pulled up to their house in the gated community, one of those places with perfect lawns and judgmental neighbors. Jennifer's SUV was in the driveway. So was Derek's truck. But when I knocked on the door, nobody answered. I knocked again, harder this time. Nothing. My chest started to tighten. I walked around to the side gate, calling out, "Jennifer? Sophie? Anyone home?" The morning was already getting hot, typical Texas May, and the silence felt wrong, heavy. That's when I heard it. A sound so faint I almost missed it. A whimper, crying, coming from the storage shed in the backyard. I ran. The shed was one of those metal things, 8 by 10 feet, where they kept lawn equipment and pool supplies. The door was padlocked. The crying got louder when I approached. "Sophie?" I pressed my ear against the hot metal. "Baby, is that you? Daddy?" Her voice was so small, so broken. "Daddy, is that really you?" Something inside me snapped. I didn't think. I grabbed a shovel leaning against the fence and smashed the padlock until it broke. The door swung open, and the smell hit me first. Urine, sweat, fear. Sophie was curled in the corner on the concrete floor. No blanket, no mattress, just a bucket in the opposite corner that she'd been using as a toilet. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her clothes were filthy. She was shaking even though it had to be 35 degrees Celsius in there. I scooped her up and she clung to me like I was the only real thing left in the world. "How long?" I managed to ask, even though I didn't want to know the answer. "How long have you been in here?" "Since Friday night," she whispered against my chest. After dinner, Derek said I was being disrespectful because I didn't finish my vegetables. He said liars and brats live like animals until they learn. Friday night. It was Monday morning, 72 hours. "Water," she croaked. "Can I have water?" I carried her into the house, kicking open the back door. Jennifer was passed out on the couch, empty wine bottle on the coffee table. Derek was coming down the stairs in gym shorts, looking annoyed. "What the hell are you doing here?" he said, like I was the problem. I set Sophie down gently on a kitchen chair and got her a glass of water. She drank it so fast she choked. "Call 911, I told Derek, my voice deadly calm. "Right now." "For what?" "She's fine. Just needed some discipline. Kids these days are too soft." That's when I noticed Jennifer stirring. She sat up, saw me, saw Sophie, and the color drained from her face. Not surprise, guilt. "You knew," I said. She couldn't look at me. I pulled out my phone and called 911 myself. Sophie kept drinking water, glass after glass, and I noticed the marks on her wrists where she'd been trying to get out. The operator asked me questions, and I answered them mechanically while staring at Derek, memorizing his face. The way he stood there like this was all perfectly reasonable. The police arrived in 8 minutes. Paramedics were right behind them. They took Sophie to Dell Children's Medical Center, while 2 officers stayed to question Derek and Jennifer. I rode in the ambulance, holding Sophie's hand, while the paramedics set up an IV for dehydration. "Daddy," Sophie said softly, "Luna won't wake up." My blood went cold. "What do you mean, baby?" "She's in the garage. Derek said she was too noisy, so he put her out there Friday. But it's been so hot, and I think something's wrong." At the hospital, they admitted Sophie for observation. Severe dehydration, mild malnutrition, psychological trauma. The pediatrician took one look at her, and I saw the horror in his eyes. He'd seen abuse cases before, but this one got to him. While Sophie was sleeping, I drove back to the house. The police were still there, photographing the shed. I went to the garage. Luna's cage was in the corner, in direct sunlight from the window. The hamster was dead, had been for at least 2 days based on the state of her. The water bottle was empty. I took photos. I don't know why. Maybe I knew I'd need them later. Derek was arrested that afternoon. Jennifer wasn't, which seemed insane to me. But apparently knowing about abuse and allowing it isn't quite the same as doing it in the eyes of the law. The detective assured me this was serious, that Derek would be charged with child endangerment, possibly more. Sophie stayed in the hospital for 2 days. She barely spoke. When she did, it was to ask if Derek was coming back. I told her no. I told her she was safe, but I could see in her eyes she didn't believe me. The preliminary hearing was 3 days later. Derek's lawyer argued it was a disciplinary measure that went too far, but wasn't intended to harm. First offense. No criminal record. Upstanding member of the community, with hundreds of social media followers who vouched for his character. The judge set bail at $50,000. Derek's parents posted it that afternoon. I sat in that courtroom and watched him walk out, smiling at his lawyer like they'd just won a game. My daughter had spent 3 days locked in a metal box in the heat, and he spent 3 hours in a holding cell. The protective order meant he couldn't come within 500 meters of Sophie, but he could still text Jennifer. And he did. Constantly. I know because Child Protective Services forwarded me screenshots as part of their investigation. Tell Sophie I'm sorry. This is all a misunderstanding. We can be a family again. Jennifer, to her credit, finally started seeing through him. Or maybe she was just covering herself. She told CPS she'd been drinking heavily, that she'd known Derek put Sophie in the shed but thought it was just for a few hours and then passed out. The guilt ate her alive. Or maybe it was just fear of losing custody. Sophie started therapy. Twice a week, sessions with Dr. Nina Okafor, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma. I sat in the waiting room during those sessions, listening to the muffled sound of my daughter's voice through the door, and felt completely helpless. The trial was set for 6 months out. The Crown prosecutor said they had a strong case, but Derek's lawyer was already filing motions, looking for technicalities. There was talk of a plea deal, 2 years probation, mandatory counseling, community service, 2 years probation for what he did to my daughter. I started having dreams about that shed, about Sophie's voice calling for me, about arriving 5 minutes too late. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., drive to my apartment complex's gym, and punch the heavy bag until my knuckles bled. One night, about 3 weeks after the arrest, I was scrolling through Derek's Instagram. He'd gone quiet publicly, but I found a post buried in his stories. A cryptic quote about weathering storms and truth prevailing. The comments were full of support, people who believed he was being railroaded, people who thought I was an overprotective ex-husband making things up. That's when I started planning. I told myself I just wanted to understand him better, to see if there was something I'd missed, some explanation that would make this make sense. But that was a lie. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted him to feel what Sophie felt. I spent 2 weeks learning Derek's schedule. He was back to training clients at an upscale gym in downtown Austin, acting like nothing had happened. The protective order meant he couldn't go near Sophie's school or our homes, but the rest of the city was fair game. He left the gym late on Friday nights, usually around 10 p.m. after his last client. I borrowed a cargo van from my buddy Ray, who owned a construction company, told him I was moving some furniture. He didn't ask questions. That Friday, I parked in the gym's underground garage and waited. Derek came out at 10:15, gym bag over his shoulder, scrolling on his phone. He was alone. The garage was empty. I'd timed it perfectly. I got out of the van. Derek. He looked up, saw me, and immediately tensed. You're violating the protective order by being near me. That order protects Sophie, not you. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. My lawyer advised me not to. I'm sure he did. I stepped closer. Did he also advise you on what it feels like to be locked in a box for 72 hours? Derek's jaw tightened. That was an accident. I fell asleep, lost track of time. You didn't fall asleep for 3 days. Look, I'm sorry your daughter is so sensitive, but kids need discipline. My dad used to lock me in the—" He stopped himself, realizing what he'd almost admitted. That's when I knew. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a pattern. Derek had been locked up as a kid and thought it was normal, thought it was parenting. It didn't make me feel better. It made me angrier. I pulled the taser from my jacket pocket. "You owe Sophie 72 hours. His eyes went wide. "You're crazy. I'm calling the police." "Go ahead. Tell them you're alone in a parking garage with your victim's father. See how sympathetic they are." He ran, not toward the exit, but deeper into the garage, probably looking for security or witnesses. I was faster. The oil rig work keeps you fit. I caught him near the stairwell and hit him with the taser. He went down hard. I dragged him to the van. Got him inside, zip-tied his wrists and ankles, put duct tape over his mouth. The whole time, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the realization that I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I drove to Ray's construction site on the east side of town. There was a storage container in the back lot, one of those 20-foot shipping containers they used for equipment. I'd been there dozens of times for work. I knew the security cameras didn't cover that corner. I knew the night watchman made his rounds every 2 hours. I opened the container, threw a bucket inside. A gallon jug of water, about a third full. A protein bar. The same provisions Derek had given Sophie. Actually, more. Sophie hadn't even gotten the protein bar. Derek was awake when I pulled him out of the van. His eyes were wild with fear, trying to scream through the tape. I cut the zip ties on his ankles so he could walk, pushed him into the container. 72 hours, I said. Starting now. Every hour, I'm going to come back and tell you what time it is. I'm going to tell you what Sophie was feeling at that exact point, and you're going to sit here and think about what you did. I closed the container door. The sound of the metal sliding shut was the same sound Sophie must have heard when Derek locked the shed. I secured it with a padlock and walked away. The first 24 hours, Derek was angry. I could hear him pounding on the walls when I came back from my hourly check-ins. I'd open the small vent at the top and speak through it. "Hour 12, I said. Sophie was crying for water at this point. Her lips were starting to crack. She called for her mother. Nobody came. Hour 18. She tried to break the door down, hurt her shoulder, gave up. Started trying to ration the water she didn't have because you didn't give her any. By hour 24, the pounding had stopped. When I opened the vent, Derek was sitting in the corner, knees pulled to his chest. "Please," he said. His voice was hoarse. "I get it. I understand. Let me out. You're at the 1-day mark. Sophie had 2 more days to go. You've got 48 hours left." I closed the vent. Hour 36. He was bargaining, promising he'd plead guilty, serve time, never come near Sophie again. I told him what Sophie had been doing at hour 36, hallucinating from dehydration, seeing shapes in the darkness, thinking her father had abandoned her. Hour 48, Derek was crying, begging, saying he was sorry, that he'd been wrong, that he understood now. I almost believed him. Sophie was crying too at hour 48, I said through the vent, but quieter. She was too weak by then. She'd stopped calling for help because she thought nobody cared. Hour 60. Derek tried a different approach. Said he'd kill himself if I didn't let him out. Said his death would be on my conscience. I told him Sophie had thought about death too, wondered if dying was better than 1 more hour in that shed. Hour 72. I opened the container door. Derek was a completely different person. He couldn't stand up. His eyes were vacant. He'd soiled himself. The water jug was empty. The protein bar was untouched because at some point, survival instincts shut down, and you stop caring. I'd left my phone in the container at hour 70, with the voice recording app running. In those last 2 hours, Derek had confessed everything. How he'd locked Sophie up before, shorter times, when I wasn't around. How he'd killed Luna on purpose because the hamster was annoying. How he'd planned to do it again if Sophie didn't learn respect. I called 911 from a burner phone and told them there was someone who needed medical attention at the construction site. Then I drove Derek's truck to the gym parking garage, wiped it down, and left it where he'd parked it Friday night. The police found Derek in the recording. His confession was admissible because he wasn't under arrest when he made it, just talking to himself. Or so his lawyer tried to argue. But the Crown prosecutor pointed out that confessions made under duress aren't admissible. And Derek's lawyer shot back that nobody had forced him to talk, he'd chosen to confess. It was a mess. But the recording was damning. Derek pleaded guilty to 3 counts of child endangerment, 1 count of animal cruelty, and got 8 years in provincial prison. No plea deal, no probation. Jennifer went to rehab, 30 days inpatient, then outpatient therapy. CPS granted me full custody with Jennifer having supervised visitation once she completed treatment. She's trying. I'll give her that. She's been sober for 4 months now and shows up to every visit with Sophie. Sophie's been in therapy for 6 months. Dr. Okafor says she's making progress. She sleeps through the night now, most nights. Started ballet again. Talked about maybe getting another hamster, though she's not ready yet. We built a little memorial in the backyard for Luna. Sophie painted a rock with Luna's name, and we planted flowers around it. Last week, Sophie asked me about Derek. Where is he now, Daddy? He's in prison, baby, where he can't hurt anyone. Did you do something to him before he went to prison? Kids are smarter than we think. I looked at her, this brave little girl who'd survived something no child should survive, and I made a choice. I made sure he understood what he did to you, I said carefully. I made sure he'd never forget it. She thought about this for a long moment. Then she hugged me. Thank you for coming home, Daddy. Thank you for finding me. I held her tight and didn't say anything, because there was nothing to say. I'd crossed lines, broken laws, done things I can't take back. Some nights I lie awake, wondering if I'm any better than Derek. But then I remember Sophie's voice through that shed door, and I know the answer. I'm not better. I'm just a father who ran out of faith in the system and decided to become the consequence my daughter needed. Derek's case made the news, not because of what he did, but because of how he got caught. There was speculation about vigilante justice, theories about who'd locked him in that container. The police investigated, but they never found enough evidence to charge anyone. The detective assigned to the case came to my apartment once, asked some questions, looked me in the eyes and said, "Funny how things work out sometimes." I didn't respond. He didn't push. Sophie's case became part of a larger conversation in Texas about mandatory reporting and the gap between knowing about abuse and being legally culpable for it. Jennifer's testimony helped change some laws. Now, if you're aware a child is being abused and you don't report it within 24 hours, you can be charged as an accessory. It's called Sophie's Law. My daughter's name is now attached to something that might save other kids. That's worth something. The construction site where I took Derek was demolished 2 months ago. They're building condos there now. Sometimes I drive past it and remember that night, the weight of the padlock in my hand, the sound of Derek screaming through the vent. I don't feel guilty. I feel nothing. Maybe that should scare me more than it does. Last month, Sophie came home from therapy with something Dr. Okafor told her to do. Write a letter to Derek. Not to send, but to process her feelings. She showed it to me. It said, "You tried to make me small, but I'm still here. You tried to make me scared, but I'm getting braver. You tried to make me nothing, but I'm everything to my dad. You lost. I won." 9 years old and already wiser than most adults. I'm writing this now because I want other parents to know something. The system is supposed to protect our kids. Most of the time, it does. But sometimes it fails. Sometimes the people who hurt children get second chances they don't deserve. Sometimes the law moves too slowly, and evil moves too fast. I'm not telling you to do what I did. I'm not saying vigilante justice is right, but I am saying this: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong with someone around your child, it probably is. Don't ignore red flags because you want to be polite or keep the peace. Don't assume the courts will fix everything. Document everything. Take photos. Record conversations if your province allows it. Build a case because you might need it. And if the worst happens, if someone hurts your child and walks away unpunished, you'll have to make a choice. Live with the injustice or become the reckoning. I chose reckoning. Sophie chose healing. Somehow, we're both still standing. That day she came out of the shed, dehydrated and broken. I promised myself I'd go to the ends of the earth to protect her. 3 weeks later, I went to the edge of who I thought I was and discovered I'd go even further. I don't regret it. I never will. But I do think about it. Late at night, when Sophie's asleep and the house is quiet, I think about the moment I closed that container door. The moment I became someone who could do that to another human being, even someone who deserved it. My therapist, yes, I see one too now, says I'm processing moral injury. The psychological damage that comes from violating your own ethics, even for a good reason. She says a lot of veterans deal with it. People who had to make impossible choices in impossible situations. I wasn't at war, but I was in battle, for my daughter's soul, for her sense of safety, for her belief that the world could still be good. And I won. The cost was a piece of myself I'll never get back. But I look at Sophie now, laughing at something silly on TV, her smile getting a little wider every week, and I know it was worth it. Every single hour.